Welcome back to Your Average Witch, where we talk about witch life, witch stories, and sometimes a little witchcraft on the full and new moons every month. In this episode, I'm talking to Kacie of Kacie's Corner. And just as a warning, we do get into some mental health issues and bullying, and it might be a little bit disturbing. But Kacie tells me about growing up as a witch in Texas's Bible Belt, her involvement with the DFW Pagan Unity Fest, and why she wears witchy symbols like the triple moon and pentacle openly. Before we get to the good stuff, I'd just like to ask a favor of you as a listener. I would love to make this podcast better, and with your help, I might be able to. If you go to the link in the show notes and write a little note about why you like this podcast, and then go into your email and verify it, I might win seed money to improve the show. The contest is through something called Podcash and is open to small podcasts who have received less than $10,000 in sponsorships, which is definitely me. My goal is to buy a better, more portable recording system, so when I do things like record on site at Anahata's Purpose or do in-person interviews, I'm able to have great sound quality. And I would really appreciate your support. And after that, now let's get to the stories. Hi, Kacie. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Would you please introduce yourself and let people know who you are and where they can find you?
Yes, I will. First, thank you so much for having me. My brain broke for a minute. I am Kacie. I run the Kacie's Corner YouTube channel over on the YouTubes. It's fairly new. You can find me on Facebook at Welcome to Kacie's Corner. And then over on Instagram, it's at KillaCacie327. And that's my Instagram. And over on Twitter, my oldest one, you'll find me at just Kacie. That's how long I've been on there. I didn't need any numbers back then. And that's where you're just gonna find like my activist stuff over there. And I also do the monthly group spells over in the Waba Facebook coven. And I run a private dog grooming business for special needs dogs where I give them an alternative to the salon experience where that just didn't work out for them. So I give them a private grooming experience around, their special needs and change their minds about grooming.
What made you start to do the group spell?
Ooh, I saw there was a need, community stuff. It was the community. I had, been a part of the DFW Pagan Unity Fest. Oh yeah, I am also one of the volunteer coordinators for that. So go check out the DFW Pagan Unity Fest Facebook page. But being a part of that and doing the community rituals there, but as a solitary person, I didn't think I needed that anymore when I left the Christian community and stuff. But then I also saw the power in that. And when the Wabagals, when they had done that first group spell, and then someone else put up another one, and then I was like, this is pretty cool. This is I'm feeling it, man. And people were kind of wanting it to keep going on, but I was like, okay, I think I could do this. And when I asked on the Patreon page first if anybody minded if I do this, if anybody would be into this. And I really expected them to be like, no, just get out of here. Just quiet you. We got this. I've been kicked out of a lot of places and, quote unquote, put in my place first, step it out of line. And yeah, so I was expecting that to happen, but it didn't. They let me run with it. And then it just kept going when this is about to be the third year.
I think fellowship is not something people think about as witches because I was surprised at Anahata's. I was surprised that I needed it.
Oh man. Yeah, that's how I felt when I first started going to the Pagan Unity Fest, because that had been and I had known at that point I'd known I needed some fellowship, but I had been on 10 years of pretty much just out of the community and trying to figure out what it all meant to me, what my faith was going to be. I say those were like atheist witch years or pagan years. I went back and forth for a long time on that. And then for my own mental health, I had gone through cognitive behavioral therapy for, because I'm bipolar
Yay!
too. Yes, it changed so much. And like, I
Yeah,
couldn't
for me
do
too.
anything I did now, if I hadn't been through that. But it's been a very long journey. And I was able to go through that when my middle son was born. And it was through the Texas workforce, I was able to get the job training for dog grooming and do the CBT, I think that's what people call it.
Yeah.
But go through all the therapy, and also at that time get on medication to stabilize, to be able to do all that, and to process everything. And it was a program Texas had at the time for uninsured people. It's the North Star program, but it ended like shortly after that. After I finished school and everything, I was like the last people to really benefit. And since then, I haven't been able to be on medication. So I had to, do all I can to, I read
Use them
everything I
coping
could
skills they
about,
taught you in
yeah, to
CBT.
apply those skills and to continue learning about my diagnosis, because it had been very suddenly cut off of everything when that program ended. But thank goodness for the library. And one of the books I read about being bipolar and was written by a woman who was similar to my age. And so it was like in a language I understood, and it recommended finding a spiritual community and being a part of some sort of community that helped keep you on like a schedule, and helped support you and held you responsible. So like, and it was a very, Abrahamic faith centric, because that was what the author knew, but she also like was like, whatever works for you. And so I had, getting back into like, witchy pagan community at that time. That was when I started looking for pagan parent groups. Oh yeah, that's also when I became an admin on the Pagan Parents Facebook page. You can also find me there at Facebook/Pagan Parents. Because there was only, back then, everything was Wiccan. And
Yeah.
it was, and I had very much, when I had left, that in my 10 years in the desert, I had very much decided like that was not for me. These very binary centric, like that was not for me. And it was, nor organized religion at all. Like I just couldn't. But like I needed community. And so first, online communities, that was, finding pagan parents. There was only like 30 people that liked that page, and it was the only pagan parent thing I could find. And so then when like right after that, the admin, she was, was like, hey, anybody want to help me out here? I don't really do much here. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so that grew. I don't know. I think we're almost to 1,000 now. Like there's a ton of other options now. And I was most busy on that when my kids were younger. And I had, I was able to share like the way I practice with them, and, build like a mom community there. But at some point, as my kids got older, I was, my oldest was heading into high school. I was like, oh, I need to start figuring out what I'm, for me, my community is going to be without, separate from mom. And so that was, when I started making myself, be more active in online communities, because that's always where I felt the most comfortable at, especially Facebook. Like I live there. And I had already been a part of a really amazing like activist community during the Arab Spring, and that we ended up doing monthly moon gatherings under the full moon. And those were the first like online monthly gatherings I was a part of and helped organize. And that was so special. And so when it came to doing the online monthly gatherings for the Waba, that was another thing I felt like I could, we could recreate this. Like I'd seen it was something special and something that people all over the world, didn't matter your time zone, you could do it in such a way to try and welcome everyone.
So you mentioned you sort of switched between pagan and witch. What does it mean when you call yourself a witch?
Yeah, it's very purposeful. And like I said, that was a long journey, but it is, I'm definitely like, actively, openly aligning myself with, with the marginalized folks, throughout history that have been historically called witch, have been for me, I was always called a witch. Like, you grow up a weird little left-handed girl in the South who asks a lot of questions and doesn't smile on cue, and you get called a witch and
Lord, how
a
dare you
lot of
not
other names.
smile?
Yeah. Oh my Lord. Ew. And so it was, something I was always aware of, but I was also, always aware of, all the other witches throughout history and, you know, pop culture witches, like even in like my Berenstain Bear books, like they had like a spooky neighbor witch, but she really was just a nice person. And it's like it was always really complicated for me. And then in like high school, it ended at like I was an out. I decided, I by that point I'd been always, learning about this stuff. I'd read my way through the library and ended up in the witchy stuff, and I'd known about it and had been an out witch at this time in high school. And but I was, Wiccan was the safest thing for me to cling to. And the first thing I knew about this was like the late 90s. And my first little coven I had, it was like me and three other girls. And then one of them, after our first little gathering, she ended up caught like she was basically like a spy for our Christian friends, and like reported back to the group. And they like called me on three-way and everybody was silent, but she like had me like confessing all my, all the witchy stuff we did and all my sins. And so then they had all got together and like kicked me out and wrote a big letter about how what a terrible influence I was and I needed to be saved, and like dropped it off at my house. and and then like kicked me out. And
What a
then
bunch of
short
cunts.
Oh man. I kicked a hole in the wall that reading that letter. It was terrible. Uh that triggered a whole thing with my own mental health. But I still had this identity and as the witch. And but then like in the coming years it got worse, and there was like this meet you at the pole prayer group.
Yeah,
Oh
Jesus.
man. They they decided to, instead of just the one day a year meet and pray, they were going to start praying there every day because there was evil afoot in that
And
school,
it's you.
and it was me.
Uh,
And so like they surrounded me and my friend one afternoon while we were having to wait for her mom to come pick us up. And she was like my one witchy friend I had left, but she couldn't be out because her parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, and that was a whole other load of trouble. And so she was just known as an atheist, but that was still bad enough. And we dressed, we were goth. So we looked the part. And we didn't want to go sit in the mud or anything to wait for that day to wait for her mom, so we had to be up in this like on the platform area where they were praying, and they ended up like circling us and shoving us around and yelling about how we needed to be saved and repent and let them save us and all those things. And but like I was the only one taking the brunt as like the witch. Like, I knew she was, but I wasn't gonna out her and I wasn't gonna throw her under the bus. So I was kind of just like standing in front and like taking it. And when we didn't get any support, we finally got out of that and we made it inside to the school, but when we didn't get any support from the school, they didn't, they told us we needed to change the way we dressed, and maybe we wouldn't draw so much attention to ourselves.
oh, yeah,
Um,
because you're the wrong one.
yeah. And
Because
at
of the
that,
what you're wearing.
yeah. And at that time, like, I didn't have any access to many other witches or pagans here in, the, North Texas area where I was growing up. And except for that one friend. And and after that, like, she went super back in the closet. And like she was still goth, but like that just really threw both of us through a whole mental health crisis, and where we drifted apart because we had to recover in different ways. But eventually it just became safer to drop the witch and to just be pagan, because that was less of a target. And so when I finally, after that happened, and I, you know, became a teen mom like shortly after that and graduated from high school, and I was, it was just safer for us just to be pagan. If I was pagan, and I kept, playing along, and I would, let my friends and let family, my, their father's family, take me to their churches and stuff, and, and but just be the pagan, that was safer for them, for everybody. And so when you doing a lot of, soul searching with myself, and tons of more reading through like 3 more libraries, because that's what I do, and learning about all kinds of different faiths, and learning about the Abrahamic religions, and seeing the ways, maybe everybody wasn't so different. And it became, I don't know, I revisited the term witch and was like, okay, am I ready to take this on and, proclaim this is who I am, and be maybe a target again? And maybe not have anybody to have my back anymore, to lose all this community and be alone once again. And that was like a big leap of faith for me to start, claiming that title. But it was like right after that I started, it was, I gave myself permission to exist, is what I always call it. And basically the conversation I had with myself was like, I saw my Christian aunts and my Catholic grandma, like everyone that's living their faith through every bit of their life, and having an amazing community that supported their small businesses, and having all this support. And I wanted that, but as my true self. And so I gave myself permission to exist, and started working through the things that were holding me back, like my social anxiety fears, and because that were deeply rooted in rejection and getting, being once again all alone. And took that leap, started, being a witch, and wearing my crystals and my pentagram like my family wore their crosses and their saints amulets and stuff. And just translating what I knew there to just my authentic self. And it, things started happening, like being at the mall one day, and all these young little teenage witches that were once just like me, seeing me and coming up to me in like little whispers, and like, hey, are you a witch? And just being, it would be, yeah, yes, I am. You're okay, and just being, a friendly smile for them, and just giving them a moment of a safe haven in, what I knew was pretty hostile territory here in the Bible Belt. And just it grew from there to trying, meeting local pagans, local witches. There was a local circle I met, that were, they called themselves, I found it, gray witches. And I got to know them a bit. That went sideways, but from that I took another chance and went to the Pagan Unity Fest, and started at that first fest. I like took myself the day, made my, I don't drive because all the anxiety. And so I had, people drop me off that morning, and I was like, I'm going to spend the whole day here. I'm just going to do the classes. I'm going to be in community. I'm going to see what this is about. And not be afraid if that, that those other people show up that I'd already, had a falling out with. Like, I'm gonna do this, and I did it. And it, I got to talk to other solitaries, because I was so afraid of like not being welcome because I was a solitary. Like, again and again, it was always just, well, you need to find a group, you need to find a group. And when I went there, it was like there were other solitaries that showed up and were coming in from hours away just so they could have, they're like, yeah, this is, a safe place to just be a witch for a day. And talking to them, and feeling that community and stuff like that, just something clicked. And I was like, what, these people exist in my area? And that was where I first met Hearth Wisdom. The people at the Hearth Wisdom store, they sponsor the event, and I ended up realizing later I was meeting a lot of the friends of Wabah people, like Penelope from Prairie Fire Herbal. She vended at the event one year, and I had met her and didn't even realize it, because for those first few years, like just I would black out for the day because it was just so much. You know, I would be overwhelmed, overstimulated. But I would volunteer, so I would have like a job to focus on, and the first couple of years it was helping the vendors unload, and then eventually I got assigned to give out all the site tokens to make sure every single person that came to the event. So I went from like I was afraid to talk to anybody at all, to my job was I had to tell every single person here, you have to take the site token from me, have this pretty little thing so we can keep track of how many people show up. And I did it. I panicked at first, but then like I became so reliable on that Trish, the lady that runs that, she ended up asking me to join her at the North Texas Irish Festival to volunteer there. And that was the year just before the pandemic started. That March, it was like the last thing, and I was like just so proud of myself for getting to do something. And I got to volunteer with that, and after doing that event, and because that was also a lifelong dream, like I used to go to that event when I was a kid with my grandpa. He was first gen Irish, and then my other family would take us, but I hadn't been to that event since I was a kid, and then to get to go back as a volunteer and help and run that event, and that was really awesome. And so it was long story short, it was all that went into running to doing the event, and why I'm a witch now, because sorry, I run long.
What would you say is your most memorable witchcraft experience, and how does it affect your practice now?
Oh man. Okay, it's gonna I've thought about, there's so many things of what this was gonna be, um but I think it's gonna be my time with that circle that I had the falling out of, because it was my first chance, my first you know chance being back in the community and seeing what it could be like, um and what I didn't want in the community as well. That became a whole very clear lesson, but it was also a time I learned to trust my husband's intuition too, because that when I had met them, I had decided I was going to give myself a year and a day to, like, my own personal year and a day study, and just to redig into all of this, to build my own book of shadows and do the whole shebang. But it was going to be like on my terms, because I wasn't part of a circle or anything. But to find the online community, I ended up falling in with this circle because their high priestess, she was in charge of like all the local Facebook groups that I had stumbled onto. And so it
Hmm.
was just, that was the only community I found locally initially. And so it was like everywhere I went, and I was sharing like my pagan parents stuff, and meeting local pagan parents that way and stuff. And then she's like, yeah, I've learned this one too. So they would offer to host dedication ceremonies on her land out here. She was maybe like 15 minutes from me, and everybody was just, oh, the place is so beautiful and magical and stuff. And so I ended up like, okay, that sounds awesome, I want to do that and be a part of that. I ended up making the arrangements for the end of my year in the day, and and sharing with like her core group or whatever, and finishing that up. And there were like red flags going into it, like people would get kicked out, and she would I ignored all the red flags. I was just so happy to be a part of a group that I put my blinders on and wanted to get through this. And after I had, about the week before my dedication ceremony to my the path I was choosing, which was the hedge witch, like that was when I was like officially, after all this thinking, I was just settled on this is what I am for a lot of other reasons. But like I'd met her and seeing that land, like her, talking to her in person that day, all of a sudden that was when she first decides to bring up, oh, we have all the same mental health issues, and dazzles me with relating to me, and but her place, she had a similar size of land that we had, but she had like added like a little island and water thing, and she had pigs and birds, and had planted like two willows in the front, and their place had been hit by a tornado, and she had they had a double wide like us, but they had rebuilt it and added like a little, turned her kitchen into like a little witchy kitchen, like a little sunroom. And I was just so inspired, like, oh, this is what I could do with our place. And, this is what I could do, with our little bit of land out here. Even if things fall apart, I can rebuild. And, because they had done it over these years and stuff. But then that night, my husband was just having all these just concerns, like, babe, I don't like her. I don't, because my husband and my kid had, my youngest had been with me too, but he was just like, I felt, I didn't have a good feeling about her. And that night he had a dream that she was trying to get us divorced. And I was just like, that's ridiculous. You, you're just jealous. You don't want me doing things on my own. And went and, you know, we did the ceremony the next night, or not next night. It was like the next week or whatever. It was the Beltane weekend. And this was like his first pagan witchy anything event to attend with me, but he wanted to be there to support me. But he's an atheist, recovering Catholic, and just as much has all the social anxiety as me, and so was really nervous and uncomfortable. But and he didn't know what to say if anybody asked him what he was doing there. And I was, we would just joke, I'll just say you're there for the food, and and just as a joke. That was like a joke between us for comfort. And when we were there that night and the event went off, my dedication ceremony went off, that was like the ceremony itself, and the other people that I met that were a part of that group. Like one of them, he's still like my brother. He is so special to me. And oh, I'm gonna get all emotional. But then a couple of them, we became friends again. But like the hostess, the high priestess, she just, the way she spoke about like some of the other people that weren't present, like calling them plagans and sounding very gatekeepery, and like she'd be all welcoming and online and all this stuff, but then having these conversations with her that night, and she was just laughing about this other, the people that weren't there, and the other mirror group we had in the UK that we were like friends with. And I was just like, well, that seems like everything I was trying to get away from with the other organized religions. That night I just, I was like seeing, all kinds of things clear up. Like I could, after that night, it was an awakening of myself and my, to my path and my craft and everything that, such special spiritual ceremonies are supposed to be. But it was also like, I was seeing, all these red flags that I was missing for the first time. And then she came back, shortly after that, trying to say something about my husband, like that he was, not wanting to be there and just making fun, and was off. She was saying like that her husband went and like was eavesdropping on my husband, making making a phone call with a friend where he said he was just there for the food. And like I was like, that was our code. I knew he was saying that already. And she just made it this whole thing. And she said, brought up, I should divorce my husband. And I was like, oh no, my husband was right. He's got the intuition. Like, his dream came true. And it was like at that moment, like all these blinders came off, and I could see, seeing that his intuition, like I should be listening to him for one. and just seeing that I could be okay if, I did have to stand up for myself and be as a solitary and not be, accepted into any group that was gonna, that I had to, gosh, get rid of my own family now because, she's decided she doesn't like him. And, for some I couldn't even get it. Like, I didn't even get what it was. But she went and like blocked me out of all the community groups. I don't know what she had said, but like suddenly everybody was either like messaging me, letting me know how awful I was and how much they hated me, and and they were unfriending me, or like my brother did, letting me know like, I don't know what's going on, but I know this isn't you, and I just want to see if you're okay. And that was, so it's getting through that experience. It was like, band-aid ripping off. Like I could stand on my own. I could see I could make friends as myself. And yeah, I needed to trust my husband more. And he also saw that he had some intuition too. That was a whole other, door opening for him over the years. Like at this point, this has been about 7 years later now. And he's like, yeah, I've been around long enough to just, there's something. I just listen to you. Do what you say. I take the things, whatever.
How do you deal with imposter syndrome?
I get mad. Mostly like these days, I feel like with the the witch part of me, like I'm so secure in that stuff. Like after that event, like after that happened, and I was like, okay, this is who I am. I'm a hedge witch. I'm a person on the edge, and I've always been. That's just, part of my identity is who I am. I'm mixed, and nobody's, I'm Hispanic, oh, sorta. We didn't really know. It was vague, and Irish, and then on my mom's side, that was a huge mystery. My grandmother would never say anything about that, like. And so I was always an in-between person, and so I've always felt like an imposter. Everything, like my whole life. I, when I was younger, I, I was born a girl. I've always been a girl, but I also have very wide shoulders, and I did boy things. So my mom would cut my hair short because it would get in the way, and so I'd look like a boy, and so then people would get, that would be this whole issue, and so then I'd have to start dressing and looking like a girl. But then when I did that, I couldn't do the boy things that I've always done. Like, it's just, so no matter what I did, I was always an imposter of everything, is what I felt like, because I was never, dark enough. I was never light enough to belong anywhere, and never enough nothing. So eventually when I gave myself permission to exist, that's where, in the witch identity, that that's where I don't feel like the imposter. Like, that's what I know. I've been at this for like, I don't know, 25 something years now, and but like being a human, when I've got to go do things that aren't witchy, and that's where I feel like an imposter about everything. And part of me is just like, I got to shut that off and just let it go, and do the thing, like, give it to God kind of thing. But for me, it's just like, just give it to the abyss and let it go, and let that part of me die for a minute so I can get through this thing that I have to do to, be a part of this society, a
Yeah,
lay person.
I relate to that. Zen it out. That's what if when everything's a shit show and I can't control anything, then
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, you win, universe. Do what you're gonna do. I'm not trying to be the boss right now. You do it. And generally things work out in my favor when I'm able to let go.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that the hubby's like, oh, I've been around long enough, just and that for me too. Yeah, and that's helped a lot with the anxiety and with everything else with my mental health, is just, being able to hit that point where I know I just need to let it go, and I gotta, let it go, move on with my life. And
Have you heard of pronoia?
yes and no, because I keep forgetting. People keep having to tell me.
Okay, so you know what paranoia is?
Yes.
The feeling that everything's out to get you.
Yeah.
Pronoia is the feeling that everything is out to help you.
Ah. See, it was the
So
root
it's
word.
kind of, Yeah, I love language. But
I
anyway,
know. That's why I took Latin in high school.
I wish I had because
Oh, that was
my shit
the
did not stick.
best. Oh,
So
man. Well, I was gonna say Latin's also part of why I, you know, solidified my being a witch and stuff was because that teacher, she thought it was like a fun fact to let us know about how the Bible had been changed, when it was translated from Latin, and how like to kill a witch used to be, could be translated as it was to not suffer your enemy to live, your captive to live or whatever. And then it got switched to to justify the witch trials or whatever. And I was like, well, if that can be a thing, then I don't have to be Christian. I can look at all these other things. And it was just like it like gave me permission to be like, okay, well, if that could be manipulated by humans and their, you know, by powerful guys and what they want, what else could be?
I hate that we have to get permission for things like that to exist or to think differently.
Yeah. Well, because when you grow, like, especially, I grew up, I had my Catholic grandma and my Baptist uncles that very much, like, their wives would insist, like, it was like joint custody going to churches, to the Baptist church and to the Catholic church. And then my parents were very, like, secular. Like, they're, thank goodness for the way my parents were. And, because like their church for us was like, my dad was like Star Wars and Rocky Horror Picture Show was like, those were our values, and those were our holiday
Oh my
films.
God, mine was Monty
Oh,
Python's Flying Circus. What the
oh
hell?
man.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, on my mom's side it was, yeah, Monty Python. Like I could stay up
Oh
like
my
anything
God.
on PBS was allowed with my mom. My mom would get us, we had encyclopedias, and I could watch PBS all I wanted. And so I'd be up all night in the middle of the night, like watching, documentaries or yeah, Monty Python and Doctor Who. And so like, part of me, and so I was always asking too many questions, and so part of me always was like, but there's this other way of being, I don't have to. But then there was, also, I live in the South, and there's a huge amount of pressure to be a part of some church, and
I
to, if
wonder
you're
why I
not,
didn't have
you're
that.
going to hell.
Why did I not have that?
I I
Maybe
don't
we
know.
maintained a facade because I grew up, my grandparents were very Baptist and we went to Bible school, vacation Bible school. I actually really liked it.
See, and I loved, yes, and I liked the Bible school part, and I love, like, there's so many good parts of Christianity that makes me so sad for all the ugly parts. But it was because, I got to see all the ugly parts, and it became like this power struggle. Because one, my mom was always like a hippie person, so she didn't let them baptize me when we were born. So like there was definitely like the struggle of who was going to get us baptized first.
Oh my
And
God, who's going to get your soul?
yeah,
Because you're just spirit money.
yeah, and while my mom was like, you know, this is how you hug a tree. And, you know, this is, you know, Meatloaf and Melissa Etheridge. These are our hymns and spiritual songs.
Meatloaf and
And
Melissa Etheridge. Oh my God.
yeah, so it shouldn't have been a surprise, because this is the other thing that made it such a, like, struggle for our soul. My mom came out as a lesbian and they got a divorce. And we were it was like I was it was like 5th grade, and so we were left with my dad, because at that time it was in the 90s, and
God forbid.
yeah, they wouldn't give custody to a lesbian. And in fact, all of our mental health problems, they decided, were because my mom was a lesbian and had was dating. And instead of, it wasn't because of the awful way the
Genetics.
people were, yeah, or well, at that time it
Oh
wasn't
yeah, or the
even
fact that you're being
genetics.
harassed and
Yeah,
abused at school.
yeah, it was that. Yeah, I was, at school all of a sudden,
It's
like,
definitely not that.
we had a huge community before she came out, but then all of a sudden everybody on our street moved. Everybody at school was like, you're
They
contagious.
moved?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
dedication.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was huge. Well, it ended up being a whole thing, and yeah, it was dedication, and
Whatever, bye.
yeah, because she had it. Yeah, they were convinced
Who's got
she was
money
going to
for
turn
that
everyone
shit?
gay, and even though she was leaving, but it was like they were. It was yeah, everybody didn't want to be our friends anymore.
The
Soon
ground
after
is
that,
tainted.
yeah, the Girl Scout troop we were in disbanded. She was in charge of the Girl Scout troop. She had been the volunteer coordinator at the school. She had been the uh the crossing guard. So my parents, they were big volunteers in the community, and I'd seen that a lot growing up, but I also saw, like, when she came out, everybody was just, "Psh, no, you're cut off. You
We're
are
just gonna let all
contagious."
our kids die by being hit by cars.
Yeah, yeah, they had to find a new thing. She wasn't welcome at the school anymore. She wasn't welcome. The Girl Scout troop disbanded, so I all of a sudden no longer had a Girl Scout troop. And then yeah, she wasn't allowed to all of a sudden all this volunteer stuff I was doing with my mom at the school all the time. Todos, that was gone. And then while I was in choir, the other choir members were like flushing my new purse down the toilet, and I couldn't even have lunch with the kids. I had to go eat with the school counselor and have lunch with them, and the teachers would take me to go shopping for my first bra and get my hair cut and stuff. Like, yeah, none of that isolation and being ostracized from everything. Yeah, that wasn't why I was suddenly so sick with anxiety. I was getting ulcers and like full of depression. No, no, none of that was the reason. The courts blamed my mom and would give my dad full custody, and then like we would get cut off from her at times if unless she would agree, like, to not have her
Don't be
new
gay real
partner
quick.
around. Hmm?
Just don't be gay real quick.
Yeah, yeah, it was ridiculous. And but thankfully, like, my mom, she like took us to gay churches. She showed that there was this other part of Christianity that was this very supportive community, that those people, yeah, definitely helped get us through that time.
Well, speaking of community, what are some things that you dislike and love about the witch community?
Oh, um the dislike, it's
Yeah, go bed first so we can come
yeah,
up.
we're gonna come back up. I know this roller coaster. Um, but and I've already touched on it, but it's just the holier than thou feel. I don't know. It's the same thing that's been a problem in our society in general, and being a part of the witch community, like especially in the early aughts, and it was like we could do no wrong. We were the answer to everything. And Earth will be healed if you're just a neo-pagan. And they there wasn't a lot of acknowledging that the same abuse, the same predators, that the same everything that affects us, and prejudices, and everything else that affects us in the rest of our lives, exists within that community too. And being aware of that and acknowledging that and keeping and calling people out, because for a long time that there were just as much as the priests were abusing people and stuff, there was abuse in the pagan community, and like that,
I
and
know
seeing
Sarah
people.
Lawless from Banefelt got a lot of flack for speaking out about that. I would love to have her on the show, just
Yes.
saying.
Putting it out there, because that's so important, because like when I had that experience with that circle, and with that high priestess lady, she was real close to that UK circle with their high priest dude. She considered him the genuine thing, but like the rest of them they were playing at it and all this stuff, and she would shut down any criticism of this guy. and because he's supposed to be some all powerful dude or whatever, and she would shut down criticism of him. She shut down criticism of herself, and everybody would get blocked and blah blah blah. But then like shortly after that, like everything, I'd got blocked, and everybody started seeing her for what she was. Shortly after, they're like, well, if you're being like this to Kacie, like she's maybe and people started coming back to me and being like, oh, I'm sorry, like, yeah, she was
Good.
a big liar and a manipulator, and all her stuff's coming to light, and I'm real sorry. And
Hello.
yeah, and I was like, yeah, I know. And at that same time, the dude, he was getting busted. It was making international news because he was busted for abusing young girls. He was using his status as a high priest, and that BS power talk, like, oh, if you have you got to have sex with me to do all the get
Ew.
your power and stuff. And there was the same BS like that.
Ew. Frankly, I'm suspect of anyone who calls themselves a high priest or priestess. I'm
Yeah.
suspect of everyone who says that.
Yeah, and I'm just like, no matter what the faith, because I'd seen that in
Exactly.
in Christianity, especially in the Catholic Church, and then you know being a part of this and seeing first it's like, oh, we're perfect and we're the blah blah blah, and but then you're seeing the same people take advantage, are a part of this too, and are taking advantage of people, and they need to be called out and criticized because it is a thing. And there's such a thing as consent and full contextual understanding of a any practice, including any sacred rites, like having sex in such a spiritual way or whatever. But like, to use that, but that's also like you know so easy to be manipulated, and it takes it's like, it's okay to call people out if they're like creeps and are taking advantage of that, and they need to be called out. And shutting down people, calling them out, that's not cool. It's not
But what do you
cool.
love? What do you love? What do you love?
Yeah. I love the way it's changing. I love the way that people are speaking out now, and the growth that's happened, especially in the past 10 years. And like, since that bad experience I had, I've also seen, like here in the DFW area, just so many, pagan with, businesses thriving, people being out and bringing that aspect into their lives. And like, it's people are accepting it, and it's being more normalized. And I get that's people are what is it, the commercialization people get upset about. But I also, I'm like, that excites me because
Yeah, it's a
they
two-edged
did it
sword.
to every other damn faith and religion, and people got to feel, it's a normalizing
Hello,
thing.
Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, yeah. Like, so I'm like, well, why can't
Can I
we?
get some rich
Yeah.
witch bitch money?
Yeah. Definitely. And I love that we are doing that. People are being, able to bring that
Don't
aspect
anybody
into their
send me
full
money.
selves. Yeah.
No one send me money. Also,
Just
I'm never
good
gonna DM
vibes.
you and tell you I can do a reading, by the
Oh
way.
yeah,
So
no. Yeah. Same. If
don't ever
you see my account with extra dots and dashes soliciting you for
whether
a
it's got extra dots and dashes or not, I will never
I will
approach
not do
someone and
that.
say, "Let me do a reading," because I don't do
Oh man.
divination.
But see, we're even getting the scammers, like just like everybody
I know, it's
else.
exciting.
Look at that. I
I do
know.
feel like a failure because nobody's messaged me and said, "Hey, what's up with my reading?" I guess I'm not big enough yet.
I think because
Speaking
you
of
have
which,
a big you have a big enough variety of like reputation that
yeah, of not doing divination.
of not doing, yeah, that's like not your thing. You make jewelry.
Speaking of
You
this,
yes.
uh, how do you feel social media has affected your practice?
Oh man, I wouldn't exist without the social media. Like,
Isn't I
even
feel bad saying that, but I agree about that for myself.
yeah, people poo-poo it all or whatever, but it's just a tool. It's everything. Like, people poo-pooed books when the printing press made books more
That's
readily
batshit.
available. Like, it's just a tool. And for me, like, even early on back in high school, when I was having all those, when everybody dropped me, and I could go online in Napster chat and in dark chat, and lordofthedark.net, in those chat
See,
rooms.
I didn't have any of that growing up, dude.
Oh, yeah. I lucked out where I was like, yeah, early. I was, born in the early 80s. And so I was in that transitional period. And then, you know, that was, and at my mom's house, I had the internet. Oh, and it was like the modem, and it was like the, but that was where I had the chat rooms, and I would stay up all night long. That was also my early insomnia years, and wasn't very healthy. But that was where I met people that were like me, and that I learned I could, like, build real actual friendships with people
Yeah.
online, where we would, like, mail each other things. That was the
I
first
know,
time
that's so fun.
yeah, it was. We would get to. I had a brother and sister on there, and we considered that, and they looked at me like their little sister. And gosh, I miss them so much. But you know, they were the first ones to be like very grr. How dare people treat you like that? You get to exist. And like, they became like my pen pals, and we could write things. And like, Troy, he would do like uber goth, like, photo shoots at cemeteries and send us pictures. But
Okay,
like,
so that brings
it
me
kept.
to this. That brings me to another question.
Mm.
Who are the three biggest influences on your practice?
Oh man, it's like, I've got three groupings, because a big part of it is the women in my that I grew up with, my aunts, and my my Lita, my grandma, and the way they, very much imbued their faith into everything they did. And especially my Lita, like, she was such a Catholic witch, like, the way she would, her, she'd take those moments in the morning to collect herself and to, read her prayer or whatever, and, or say her rosary. And, those, that helps me, when I do, to get up in the morning and do my, few moments at my altar, and to just, like, you know, I can never stay anywhere for too long. It is literally a few moments, but it helps and stuff. But also, like, the way she would, people would come to her for when they would have problems and stuff. So they would come to her for the prayers she would write, and for them to pray for her, and for, um, and so just, doing that. A lot of the stuff I do is just, um, sending, sending a little prayer, sending a little spell out, sending energy out, to people who need it and stuff. Just, it's a lot of, that sort of thing. And like, with my aunts, they were a big part of, their community and doing community service and stuff. And the same with my parents. They did a lot of community service, and a lot of my practice is about, definitely about being a part of the community and serving my community, um, even as I live on the edge of things and don't always get that community. But like, th- that that became a big part of it. And then, but also just all of humanity in general. Like, that's like my second big thing. It's just everything I've ever learned in libraries and books, or just, you know all the documentaries I watch, archaeological. I'm big into like archaeology, and that sort of stuff. Like, I wanted to be an archaeologist before I became a teen mom. And so, like, just, what humans have done at any point in time, I'm just like, wow, we are wild, amazing, crazy creatures, and we can do amazing, wild things. We are capable of so much. And like, just, I just feel so, I don't know, that's where I feel like the spark of the divine that I would see like people in church having, and when they would feel that, you where they say where they felt touched by God or they felt Jesus in their hearts or whatever. Like for me, it's being, in a community with other humans and learning from them, and learning what we've done through all of this time. It's That's a big like thing for me. And then my third, oh, the other influence on what I do is science and the advancements in science and the language of science. And that was like a big click for me too, was learning about um the way you energy is made of, the way we exist as like our little, everything we're made of is just vibrating in a certain way to, that you get this certain vibration, and you got a skin cell, and you get a few of those vibrating together, and you got skin covering our body. And like it's just an amazing thing, and figuring out, you know learning those things, and the way um modern advances, the way we're learning how our um we can see in by scanning our brains with the fancy new equipment we have, the way our brains will vibrate for certain images or certain words, and it triggers something, or the way, the placebo effect is actually doing something. Like that's placebo is a science word for magic. Like it's, those things just inspire me so much to just do what I do, and to be like, okay, well, if I can make this frequency do a thing, if I could think of this certain, word is vibrating at this frequency, then maybe I can like send that frequency out, and vibrate with some other folks on the same frequency.
Who would you like to see on the show?
Ooh, have you Myra from Hearth Wisdom? She's really awesome. I just going to, attending her classes and her shop was like one of the first places I felt like, it was, one of the few apothecary places I felt welcome at. Like most places kind of looked at me askance, and they were like, you have no credentials, get out of here. But like what Myra does,
Where are we going to get credentials?
I know, right? I know. I couldn't be a solitaire. I had to go be of some blood tradition or join a circle or something.
That's
And
wackadoo.
yeah, but like with Hearth Wisdom, it didn't matter. They talked to me. They didn't patronize. Like they didn't talk down to me. They looked me in the eye with respect and not humor. And just what she's done, doing her community classes and opening up her shop, and then as they grow, and holding the community events and stuff, that's also been a big inspiration to what I do with the community, the online community stuff with Baba. Is just, so that would just be awesome to hear her talk about, what got her to that place, and to open up that shop and everything, and to be like, hey, I can, the community needs this. I can do this. Yay.
Now, at the end, you already know.
Yeah.
Recommend something.
um, oh, I definitely recommend doing your own, like, year in a day, but wherein you're just looking at the sky. Like you're, a big huge part of what I did that year was just stepping out a few moments each day and seeing just what the sky was like, what the air felt like, what the temperature was like, what animals were singing, were popping around, or at what point the sun was, coming up over the horizon, like, because it moves throughout the year. And that was something that our humans have been doing for so very long. Is where they lived, they would plant themselves, and then they would watch the sky for at least a year, to mark out everywhere, to mark out what the sky was doing, to mark out where the solstices were, and where the equinox was, where the sun was coming up at this time. So they could do those amazing things that were like, oh, Stonehenge, it lines up with the solstice and stuff. Like they had to initially take the time to observe where these things were happening. And so I definitely, recommend taking the time to get to know where you're at, and such a way, and just in a slow way, and not, you don't have to be so pressured to do everything in like a Eurocentric way, like, for their cycle. Get to know what your cycle is, where you're at, and that's a very special thing. And also libraries. Go check out your local library, support your local library. And even if they don't have like you're like, oh, well, they don't have a witchy pagan section. Like, one, they may surprise you. Mine did. And two, there's so many other sections that apply. Check out the nature section. Check out, the indigenous section, and check out the poetry section. Check out the art section. Like, there's so many, definitely the history. And but like there's so many different, you know resources in the library that can be applied to what we do as witches, that aren't necessarily like in the, paranormal, supernatural, witchy section that they have. Like, branch out. It's awesome. And local libraries need our support.
Finally, please tell me a story that you love to tell.
Okay. Oh man, yeah. I love this story so much, because it's also about how I figured out, I was making progress in learning how to draw up my energy and move it across, toss it somewhere. I had, after attending a Pagan Unity Fest and learning through one of their workshops, like, this is how you draw up energy, and then feeling like in a group setting, like, as we closed out the energy and sent it down to the ground, like feeling that whoosh of like, oh, this is a thing. I it's like once you access a muscle, you're like, oh, that's it. And so I'd been like practicing on accessing that, and it'd been recommended to me to like just to practice with animals or something you feel an association with. And for me, I've always just animals. Like, I made friends with them when nobody else would be my friend, and they get me. And so I would practice just with like the birds and that would be flying by, and I would just focus on like love. Like, it's just like, that's gonna be the energy I'm gonna call up. That's the, love, 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 just tossing it, and or saying a hello, and talking back to the birds. Like, oh man, my neighbors have heard me talk to the birds so much now. But a couple couple of houses down, some new neighbors had brought in a horse that was clearly not people. They had brought it in to quote unquote break her, in like their very machismo way of,
Old
trying to
school.
force her. And and I would just hear she'd be so upset and scared. A lot of the time she was alone there, and so I would just be talking to her and sending her love from where I was at. And then I would start, and she hated people, but I would start, when I was walking, I'd start walking the kids to school so I could walk past her and say hi to her, and we would stop and you know just say hi, and I'd be, love, 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 like, you're okay, you're okay. And it's, not all people are bad. Not really thinking she still wouldn't, she wouldn't come up to me or anybody, and then she got out one day, and she was causing a big old ruckus, and because she was lonely, and she went down to the other end of the road to visit the horse down there. And but they were in their four-wheelers scaring the crap out of her, trying to corral her, get her back up. And at this point, like, they hadn't even been able to like successfully get like anything onto her, other than they just finally, like the week before, gotten a
Bridal?
bridle on her face. And so she had that, but she had, she wasn't letting anybody grab that. And so I went out, and I just didn't want her going between the gap between my house and the neighbor's house, because there was a dip, and I didn't want her hurting her leg or anything, because she was scared, and I didn't want there was a hole right there. So I went out and blocked it, and just stood there with my arms just wide open, and just to be like, not this way, this is a barrier, don't come walking between the houses, you can't escape this way, keep on going. And so I was out there, and this horse, she comes running up the road and then stops where I'm at. And all the neighbors are out looking. She stops, and she turns towards me and walks off the road, and then walks to me just calm as can be, and everybody's, like, freaking out, and some people are telling me to get out of the way, like, she's gonna run over me, and, like, my other neighbor, they've got their camera out, and they're just like, "Ooh," and just, aiming it at me, and she just comes to me, and some people the her people are like, get her," and I'm just like, hold on," and so I just take a moment to let her just come to me, and, you know, and I do the thing again, just like, "Love, love, love," and I very much work with my hands, so I'm, like, sending it out with my hands, and she just puts her head in my hands and lets me get her. And
Hmm.
I was like, "Oh, thank goodness, honey," because I did not want her getting back up to the main road, and she was just
Yeah.
so freaking out, and just in that moment, just to be like, everybody was freaking out because then and all the neighbors like, "Witch!"
She's a witch.
She's a witch. What is happening? How did she get this wild horse? And like I ended up getting a
Duh.
reputation for that. Like I was like, well, I was, calm. And for one, I wasn't freaking her out. I let her come to me. I didn't have a four-wheeler chasing her. Like, understand, read the signs, man, read the room. But that definitely made me feel like, hey, I got something going on here.
Yeah.
And that was also for her, and that helped them. Like they started treating her differently after that, like they did. And they got her a little pony buddy because I told
Good.
them I was
Because I
like,
was
she's
thinking
lonely.
that's a herd animal.
Yeah,
If you're
and that's
trying
what.
to gentle a
Yeah,
horse, maybe make it not terrified all the time.
yeah, and yeah. Quit like they were big arms waving at her all the time and at her a lot, and I was just like, let her come to you. Calm down, it's okay. and,
Yeah,
and
I had to explain it to my husband about cats.
Yeah, yeah, same with dogs, and especially if they're freaking out, a lot of owners will
Yeah,
wanna.
fearful ones, but
Yeah.
he just didn't know how to deal with a cat. He was constantly, like, going after it, picking them up. "You
No, no.
can't. Just leave them be. They'll come to you.
Right?
Just stop bothering them."
Cautious creatures, if you just chill a minute, they'll come to you if they want to.
It's taken
Just
10
consent.
years. The
It's a
cats
thing.
finally come to him. Exactly.
Aw.
People don't wanna admit people still don't wanna freaking give consent to their kids. They're getting their ears pierced. They're getting not neutered.
Yeah.
What do they do to boys?
The circumcision.
Circumcised.
Yes.
They get them neutered.
Yeah, they get
Whatever. I knew it was something to do with the genitals.
Right? But then it does make a difference though with whatever, interacting. Whatever
Yeah.
you're interacting with,
You
just
have
take
to
a
give them a
moment.
choice.
Yeah, and that's, a big part of my success, grooming the dogs I
Yeah.
groom is giving them a choice, like, letting them come to me, giving them some time to get to know me. And then like, okay, if you're not going to do this thing, then okay, we can do this other thing. And, choosing to do and not like forcing them to do this part of the groom at this time right now because I've got to get it done now because this is on my schedule. It really just helps a lot to let the dogs trust you and understand that they can make the choice that no, this isn't happening right now. We'll come back
Yeah.
to that.
Which, by the way, everyone who has pets, if you take your pet to some place like PetSmart or Petco, both of which are places I've worked as a groomer,
Mm,
they don't have time to give your dog that option. Find an
right,
independent groomer if your
right.
dog is the least bit fearful or whatever. Find an independent groomer who is willing to work with the dog instead of work for the company.
Right. So
Because guess
many.
what? The company doesn't really care about your dog. They care about your wallet.
Yeah, they've got a bottom line, they've got profits they've got to make, especially the bigger corporations. But I found even working in the smaller salons and stuff I worked in, it was very much a lot of pressure to and I see it in the online communities too. It's get more and more and more dogs done in one day.
Yep.
And but I also saw like a lot of these dogs that were getting labeled as aggressive and they were getting kicked out of the shops or priced out of the shops. Um, and
Well,
having this
you
label.
have to. I mean, I feel like we had to be able to continue to see them. I
Yeah.
understand being charged more.
Yeah, and especially if you've got to, you've got to be fitting them in with these all these other dogs that aren't acting that
Like
way.
a dumb lab
And
who doesn't care about anything. As long as you hold a treat near its face, it'll do well,
yeah,
you could do whatever you want.
yeah, and when you're in a shop setting, those dogs can come in and out just fine. And but it's really hard to slow it down for these other dogs that not necessarily they may not be aggressive. It's the situation that they're in, and I get that. Like that, I looked at these dogs so much, and I'm like, oh man, that's not aggression, that's fear.
Yeah.
They're having a
Like
panic attack,
99%
honey.
of the time, it's fear.
Yeah, I'm like, me
Once in a while,
too.
there is a dick dog, but there's dick people.
Yeah,
Everybody's a dick
yes.
sometimes.
There's but that's like such a minimal, you such a small portion of these
Yeah.
dogs that I deal with, where they just needed a change of scenery. And then seeing them grow over time, where I do the same thing with them that I did with the horse. I started applying that. That's part of what gave me the idea to do what I do, was like, well, maybe I can fill these dogs with love and change the narrative about what a groom is, and have it being a more loving experience. And so when they're with me, I am
You're
very
not just
much
being
like,
mauled,
yeah, yeah. And it's not just somebody yanking you around and you got to do this right now
pulling
because
your
they've got a
hair out,
schedule to keep.
hurting your feet
Yes.
because toenails.
And I'm just like, all right. And I talk to them so much. And that really
Yeah.
does, like, my husband laughs at me because when he comes in and hears me, especially with the more freaked out the dog, the more I'm talking and explaining what I'm doing to them. And, he's like, man, you talk to them like I talk to my cobras. Like, you're just like, you gotta keep, because part of that you're talking to yourself through what's going on.
At the end, I just stopped doing deshed or not deshedding. What is it called? Dematting. I was just
The
like,
mat.
nope. If it's matted, it's shaving or get out. I'm
Oh
not
yeah, yeah,
hurting
no,
your dog because you can't be bothered to figure out how to take care of it.
yeah, that was always my, like, when I started doing this, is the whole vanity, or humanity over vanity, mantra or whatever. But it was, and me being my own boss, like, it was really easy to do that, where, because I also saw people treating me differently, because it wasn't, they didn't have somebody else to go up to be like, oh well, I'm gonna have this other person tell you that you have to, you know
Okay.
hamburger meat my dog's skin so I can have, dead hair, like.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
Yay, thank you so much for having me. Hope I wasn't too crazy manic all over the place. Fun with bipolar people.
And I'll see you over in Wabah.
Yes, see you on the Waba interwebs and all the other places, because that's where I live.
Me too.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.
I got another review.
Like, when I started doing this, is the whole vanity, or humanity over vanity, mantra or whatever. But it was, and me being my own boss, like, it was really easy to do that, where, because I also saw people treating me differently, because it wasn't, they didn't have somebody else to go up to be like, oh well, I'm gonna have this other person tell you that you have to, you know
Okay.
hamburger meat my dog's skin so I can have, dead hair, like.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
Yay, thank you so much for having me. Hope I wasn't too crazy manic all over the place. Fun with bipolar people.
And I'll see you over in Wabah.
Yes, see you on the Waba interwebs and all the other places, because that's where I live.
Me too.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.
I got another review. Yay. This one is from Cowgirl Bread over on Apple Podcasts, and it's titled Mama Kim. Cowgirl Bread says, I'm not going to lie, I've never been one to write reviews, but since Mama Kim makes you feel like family, well, I guess I have to stop and write this review. Because this is the podcast that introduces you to fellow witches that makes you feel like you're truly not alone in your ups and downs of your practice. And as a witch that has felt alone a lot in their journey, this podcast has made me feel like I have a family. And since I know who this is, you do have a family. It's with us. We're your family now. Thank you for your review. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Your Average Witch. You can find us all around the internet on Instagram at Your Average Witch Podcast, Twitter at Average Witch Pod, Facebook at facebook.com/Your Average Witch Podcast, at youraveragewitch.com, and at your favorite podcast service. Want to help the podcast grow? Leave a review. You can review us on Amazon and Apple Podcasts, and now you can rate us on Spotify. You just might hear your review read at the end of the next episode. To rate Your Average Witch on Spotify, click the home key, click on Your Average Witch podcast, and then leave a rating. You can also support the show by going to patreon.com/cleverkimscurios. If you'd like to recommend someone for the podcast, like to be on it yourself, or if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, send an email to youraveragewitchpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the moon changes.